Lucinda you're starting your doctoral program, correct?
Yeah,
at Durham University, and your presentation is called Nostalgia of Christmas Worship, a resource for recollection, reflection, and renewal. A little bit about yourself. You have your undergraduate degree in theology at Durham, master's in psychology of religion at Haythorpe College in London, and now you're beginning your PhD in Durham, looking at British Christmas traditions, particularly in relation to the concept of the Christmas spirit. And I will thoroughly enjoy watching her criticize and analyze all of you, so it should be fun.
Right, thank you so much. So here goes. So I don't know what comes to your mind when you think of Christmas, what kinds of images or associations or memories it might conjure up for you. I'm guessing that most of us in this room celebrate it in some way. We've been talking a lot about the celebrations of other people, and just following on really from what we just heard about, I want to just kind of delve in to what we think of as Christmas. So for me, like I suspect many others in Britain, the kinds of images that I think of when I think of Christmas, and not Krampus, I'm sorry, but robins, mince pies, sparkly snowmen, silly jumpers with sticky out carrots on the front, something like that. Father Christmas obviously has to be there. But one key quintessential Christmas card-worthy scene has to be something that would look a little bit like this. So singing along with pious choristers, probably in red, to traditional carols such as O Come All Ye Faithful, in the magical candlelit atmosphere of a local church carol service. So I just want to take a moment today to dive into this paradigmatic scene for a moment, and to just question how many of the people singing O Come All Ye Faithful would actually consider themselves to be faithful in the true religious sense of the word. What is it exactly about this atmosphere that people find so magical, so special? And fundamentally, why is it that churches which are left increasingly barren for the rest of the year manage to continue to attract such excited and energised crowds for their Christmas services? So as far as I can see, the popularity of the Christmas carol service in Britain presents us with a distinct sociological anomaly. So as many of you will probably be aware, we've seen extensive evidence of decline in Church of England attendance figures over the last half century or so, and it's a decline that's certainly not going away. We've seen dips over the last couple of years, quite dramatic dips. But for some reason, as I said, at Christmas time, people are still there. Congregations remain pretty strong. And these media reports are showing that in recent years, not only have we seen that they're still remaining strong, we've actually started to see a rise in the number of people attending. So the Church of England suggests, I think this is figures from last year, roughly 2.5 million people attending church. So this amounts to more than 3 times the numbers of people turning up on an average Sunday, and nearly double the amount turning up for Easter. So to look at this in a little bit more depth, I want to share with you some research that I carried out last year with Holy Trinity Church in Stratford on Avon. And for those Shakespeare fans amongst you, you might have realised this is the church where Shakespeare's buried. So it's a pretty famous, prominent church, in a big, prominent market town. So in a way, it does have quite a lot of traction just by itself. But I still want to point out that it still sees disproportionate numbers of people turning up for its Christmas services. So the service that I particularly want to look at is held on Christmas Eve annually each year, and it sees around 800 people turning up, and people who come back year after year. And this is in contrast to around 100 people who turn up on a regular Sunday. So to look into this, I conducted a series of 8 qualitative interviews. So with congregants who had attended this service back in 2015. And the picture you can see is actually 2016, so just this Christmas just gone, you can see the queues of people lining up. So what I really wanted to do here was to compare the narratives of non-regular church attenders, so people who usually just come to this service once a year, with the narratives of regular church attenders, to see whether there was any difference or any similarity in the kinds of motivations that they had for turning up, the kinds of emotions that they were feeling whilst they were there, and how they connected this up at all to any sense of personal belief or spirituality. And what became pretty clear from the conversations across both the regular and the non-regular attender groups was this underlying theme of reminder. So Christmas and the carol service as an effective cultural symbol of Christmas appeared to be a time which in some way reminded people of their origins. It reminded them of their core identities, whatever it was that was most meaningful to them in their lives. And you can see here, I've just put up some of the main things that were spoken about in each conversation. So we can see a lot of references to memories of singing carols in childhood, of tradition, and also some mention of religion and faith. And the important thing I want to point out really is the kind of blurred boundaries between all of those categories. But not just that, the blurred boundaries between the non-regular attenders and the regular attenders. And I'll just give you a moment to look at that. It seems to me that there's pretty not much difference between those two groups. And this is why I think this is such an interesting thing to look at from a sociological point of view. All these groups attending slightly different reasons but coming together to share together. So, I want to really draw from this and really argue today that the carol service represents, for these individuals at least, a really active process of remembering. And so what I want to do in the rest of my presentation is to really outline what might be going on in this process of remembering. And I want to do it from a variety of different disciplinary perspectives before I just dive a little bit more into the interview data itself. So, first of all, I just want to point to the fact that this concept of remembering as an active process is really well supported in the psychological and neurological literature. So, consensus amongst scholars of memory has for some time now attested to the fact that memories are not so much retrieved from the past, but they are reconstructed continually from the present feeling state. This is something that's come across in all of the presentations we've seen so far. This is a kind of neurological explanation for what might be going on. So this idea is there in the psychological tradition from the word go. Freud talks about screen memories. William James talks about the reflective eye, which is interpreting the objective me and continually renewing the self-concept as it goes through. And so we can see here that people's sense of self, their sense of identity, if you like, is crucial to the remembering processes as understood neurologically. And it's also something that's been documented very well by a growing literature on autobiographical memory. And this is seen as a subset of Tolbing's concept of episodic memory. So episodic memory being when an individual enters into a distinctive past moment of themselves and they literally re-experience it. So it's a kind of like a time travel type experience we've got going on here. And it's that kind of personal significance being attributed to those kind of moments that we're talking about. So a lot of the scholars that have dealt in autobiographical memory have also linked to or connected this to the kind of implications that might come for thinking about the cultural self, which might surprise you, moves me on to the next disciplinary perspective. I just want to look at for a brief moment, just to consider. So, I want to think about, I suppose, from a more sociological, anthropological point of view, I want to suggest that Christmas as a time when we undoubtedly see a dramatic shift in social interaction rates might be described as a kind of seasonal rite of intensification. So in which social relations are reinforced and equilibrium is restored. So rites of intensification, Chapel and King coins coming from, really based on Van Gedep's famous rites of passage motif. So this would be seeing Christmas as a kind of liminal period before the rite of incorporation reincorporation that might happen then in the January when we make our New Year's resolutions and we go back into the rhythm of things and into our usual social setting. So, having just thought about that, I now want to really, I suppose, put some of those processes to one side and just have a think about what this kind of process, if it's going on, what it might actually feel like. What's the emotional tone of what's happening, I suppose. So, it became pretty clear from my interviews that what it felt like was nostalgic. That's all very well, but nostalgia isn't always the easiest thing to define. You'll see from this, there's contradiction in the very concept itself, and I think this is why it does become a very nebulous kind of term to be dealing in. So Milton and Coleman define it as the bittersweet recall of past emotional events. And it's this bittersweet aspect that I think makes it such an interesting emotion to study. So the original word's divided into two parts, and nostos, meaning homecoming, and algios, pain, grief, pain, grief, and longing, really. So the word itself was coined by a Swiss medical student, Johann Hofer, back in 1688, and he used it to describe the kind of homesickness that he was seeing being suffered by Swiss mercenaries. And I don't know, it might surprise you to know that nostalgia actually continued to be classified as a disease well into the 19th century, and then when the psychoanalysts came along, they of course saw it as delusional. And after a while though, it began to be picked up by marketing journals who started to realise, well, actually this thing kind of sells quite well. And so it's only really over the last 10 years that picking up on this trend, psychologists, primarily based in the University of Southampton, have begun to really think about what some of those psychological benefits might be. So they've argued, yes, both of these bittersweet sides of the emotion are being felt, but fundamentally people's perception of the emotion and their experience of the emotion is a positive one. So it's possible to be feeling these contradictory things, but it's also possible to kind of experience a sort of redemptive sequence in which the positive overrides the negative feeling. So like a kind of Freudian grief work type thing. So, having just sort of spelt out what nostalgia, how we might understand nostalgia, I just want to spend the rest of the time taking you through some of the main themes of my interview conversations, which I'm really seeing as different dynamics, I suppose, that might be included under this overarching idea or emotion of nostalgia. So just to kind of map this out. So first of all, anticipated excitement. This is something that's really important to underline. It's difficult to get it across when you're not actually there. I mean, it's not Christmas, it's March, you know. But people found this to be a joyous event. You know, it was exciting for people. It was buzzy. It was uplifting. They got the sense that something exciting was about to happen. It signified the start of Christmas and the start of their own Christmas ritual for many people. And so Colin, this quote at the bottom here, I think describes this really well. He talks about moving through Advent, excitement, getting towards it, and he draws it, of course, interestingly, to those moments of expectation within his childhood about getting to open your Christmas presents. How exciting is that? Getting in the zone, getting in the groove. So, next thing, this brings me to reassurance. Why reassurance? Well, because people know that their expectations are going to be met in this kind of setting. There's a kind of comfort to that, there's a familiarity. And I just got this quote here from Linda, so I think she expressed it very well. She says, you know what you're going to get when you walk through those church doors. You know you're going to get carols you'd learned as a child. People loved the carols because they knew them. Karen, she could sing them off by heart. They were dear to her. And then Linda here said something interesting that I thought really pointed to maybe some of the kind of psychological benefits that might come out of it. So she said, it's about more than nostalgia. So it's a sort of ineffable feeling. But she says everyone has a bit of soul, and this is a safe way of feeding that bit of soul. So I chose to kind of connect this to the sense of feeling that people had of uplift as they left the service. And well-being. So timeless continuity, it's really kind of continuing that theme that people saw this as a space of retreat, really. It was a place for reflection. A lot of people talked about being at peace, calm, but they also talked about magic, interesting. It seemed to be a kind of almost fantasy utopia type thing. There was a magic about the atmosphere. And this was often also linked to the true meaning of Christmas. So the church service was seen as something authentic and genuine and traditional, historic, in contrast to the commercial Christmas that people were becoming increasingly concerned about or fed up with. By the time you got to Christmas Eve, you'd done all your shopping, you peel the right vegetables. So, people tended to frame this by talking about feeling emotionally moved by a beautiful aesthetics of the building, the sense of tradition, history, as I've already pointed to, and also community spirit and how that links in. So essentially what I'm saying here is that there seemed to be a pretty blurred line between aesthetic experiences and what felt like more warm, fuzzy, nostalgic feelings of taking you back through time and forward through time, and moments of what felt more like transcendence and spirituality. And I think this is particularly expressed well in this quote from Robert, who keeps referring back to eternity, which later in his interview he connected more concertedly to a sense of God. So, and he talks about all the people over the years that have come and they've sat and they've worshipped in those places and they've looked at the same windows and they thought they were beautiful too, and they're moving through the same point. So this kind of links us again back to community spirit, communitas as we might anthropologically refer to it. But I want to really now link this to this last theme, remembrance and redemption. And of course, in the midst of all these memories and feelings of togetherness, feelings of grief also came to the surface as people reflected on, in the light of this, what had changed since the last time they were re-experiencing this moment or this memory. And perhaps more obviously, people felt a sense for lost loved ones, as Jackie's pointing to here. But they also felt a loss for elements in society that they weren't content with. They felt a loss for elements of themselves that they felt had changed or moved on, changed statuses perhaps, and for just the passing of time. Time's moved on. And I just wanted to point to what's going on in this quote here from Jackie. She talks about imagining her parents there at the service. So there's a clear kind of sense of grief and loss there expressed in that statement. But then she moves from that to talking about a more general Christmas nostalgia. So she talks about the candles and the trees and the carols. And this seemed to me very strongly in one sort of imaginative act between sort of starting with memory and then moving imaginatively through to a sense of continuity, I suppose. It seems to kind of embrace that redemptive sequence that the scholars in Southampton are referring to pretty well. So, just to sum up then, what I really want to take from this, I suppose, is that the carol service seemed to be providing, for these individuals at least, a fertile sanctuary for nostalgic self-reflection, in which people were able to recall what was really meaningful to themselves. And they did this in a way that accorded with their beliefs as they saw them. So the atheists were reaffirming their atheist beliefs. The spiritual but not religious were thinking about spiritual but not quite religious things. And the more concertedly Christian people were thinking, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm reminded of the incarnation. But this was the same process across all of these groups. And that, I want to suggest, is what gave people this sense of community spirit as they went through. And so I don't mean here that this was some kind of narcissistic self-indulgence or stopgap thing, but rather what I want to see it as is a kind of imaginative, contemplative, liminal space which enables people to reorientate themselves in time, to envisage hope for the future, to review where they're at in the present, and to draw from this the inspiration and the motivation necessary to move forward, to reincorporate themselves into the next stage of their lives. So I think that's where I want to leave it. Thank you very much.